right. I'm with Liv Boeree, everybody. Welcome to Walk-Ins. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I think we should just have a regular, sitting date where we catch up on the culture wars because you're here now.
Yep.
You're not. When did you come to Austin?
3 years ago,
Okay.
officially.
And where were you before?
Oxford, UK.
Oh, okay. So is that where you're born and raised?
Pretty much. I'm from Kent, but yeah, UK.
Okay. And what made you come to Austin and the United States?
I'd been to kind of like hot. No, I was traveling here a lot anyway when I was playing pro poker.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the World Series of Poker's in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
All the biggest tournaments are here. So I'd come every summer, but I don't know. I'd always wanted to move to the US, but could never find quite the right excuse. And then my husband, Igor, got a job working for Elon, and that required him to be in Austin. So we were like, all right, that's a very good reason to move.
What does he do for Elon?
He was helping run his philanthropy foundation.
Okay. Oh,
for a
okay.
while. He only did it for a little while, but
okay. Yeah. And so then you guys came. It was a good excuse to come.
Yep.
And is he also a poker player or just you?
Yeah.
Is that where you met?
Uh-huh.
Ah, tell me the story.
Well, we first technically met in 2010. We were both at the same poker table. But he remembers me, but I don't remember him because, in any given big poker tournament, it's maybe 3% women at most.
Right.
So I probably stuck out like a sore thumb, whereas he was just another dude in a sea of dudes. Also, I ended up winning that big tournament.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So more reason for, I won his chips. And so that was the first time we crossed paths. But then we became friends over the next 6 months. And we were just best friends for a couple of years, very platonic. But then that shifted and then we did a thing and then we were like, well, this was good, and we did it, and then we were just in love, and that's been the end of it.
Wow. So that must be so interesting to, I don't know, there's something you must learn so much about somebody playing poker with them.
You learn it doesn't always translate. Some people are very aggressive when they play poker, but in real life they're actually very gentle. Or some are very, very risk tolerant in when it comes to risking their money, but then in other things they're incredibly timid. That said, it does roughly map. If someone is very outspoken and gregarious in real life, they're probably like that at the poker table. So yeah, it can give you a glimmer. But what's cool about poker is it just it forces you to mentally model people. You're trying to get a clearer picture of their psychology, how experienced they are, how much of a mathematical thinker they are, because some people play the game very mathematically and some play it very intuitively. So yeah, you get, especially if you get to play with them for day in, day out, you'll really get to know them.
Mm-hmm. How did you get into it?
It was 2005. And I just graduated university, was planning on doing, the full academia thing, PhD and so on. I studied physics, but I needed to make some money. So I started applying for game shows randomly. I saw an ad for some game shows in the UK. And then one of the shows I got on, and it turned out they were looking for 5 beginners to teach them how to play poker. And so it was my first time actually ever on TV. And first time playing poker all in one go. And I just it was just meeting, it's like meeting your long lost love. I just fell in love with the game so much. I was like, I need to become a professional.
What did you fall in love with it in that first moment?
Well, I won the very first game I played, so that helps. But I think in part, I've always been pathologically competitive, especially back then. I just loved anything, especially if it was a game that I could beat the boys at. It was like a boys' game and I could beat them at it. Just ticked every box in my personality.
Is that why you got into physics as well? Or was that something natural?
Both. I've naturally just found it fascinating. And then I was also, comparatively good at it. But also, I went to an all-girls school. So I was actually very... there were no boys of my age in our family. There were obviously the other relatives who were older, but I was never around men or boys until the age of 18, yet I always was wanting to be like in that kind of environment. I always liked classically like male interests, video games, as I said, like hyper competitive and just anything I did. So yeah, maybe that's partially why as well. Physics, I was like, oh,
I can
going to
beat
be
the
around.
boys.
I can beat the boys. I can be around boys. Yeah, not thought of it that way. Also, like I also got really into heavy metal at that time as well, which is again very male dominated. I was like trying to learn all these like super nerdy guitar riffs and I don't know. Yeah, it was definitely.
Were you boy crazy? I mean,
yeah,
okay.
It's definitely interested in them, and I just want. Yeah, I remember like I was like I want to have a gang of boys who I'm friends with that we go out and do boy shit.
Yeah.
And I didn't get to do that until I was like 17, when I was like kind of old enough to like get a boyfriend and then become friends with all his friends.
Interesting. So then you ended up, when you fell in love with poker, did you just become obsessed with it and start, do you play it more mathematically or intuitively, or do you have like an edge as a woman because you get to use both?
I mean, yeah, that's actually, I'd say my main edge nowadays is so basically poker, when I first learned to play back then, it was very much more like art. It was more intuitive. There was some math that people did, like, calculating pot odds and that sort of thing. But
what was that?
So calculating the odds, like if if someone bets an amount and you have to decide, and there's a certain number of cards you can hit to get to make the hand you need to calculate whether you're getting the right odds.
Got it.
But beyond that, there was very little math back then because people didn't really understand. No one knew the game theory underlying the game. But then we had what's called kind of like, it was like a data revolution in poker, where all these like analysis softwares started being made, and people started like studying those. And that made the game become way more mathematical.
Interesting.
And much more like a science. And so I cut my teeth on the early version, which was much more intuitive. And at the same time, then like when all these solvers came out, I also really enjoyed that side of it, because it was like, oh, cool, I get to use my like science brain. But then after a while, it actually started becoming less fun, because it became almost more like a game of a bit more like chess, where it's like, this is what the perfect solution is. You need to try and memorize how this works across as many, a broad range of scenarios as possible. So it became more about like memorization.
Right. Which
took a bit of the magic away for me personally. Some people love that side of it, but I was like, eh. Although now, I mean, like I said, I've retired now, but I play very rarely. But it feels like now it's almost become full circle, where you can do both.
Right.
And the very, very best players are the ones who can combine, they know all the math, but they also have these like sick people reading skills, and like really, really like just like dialed in with their intuition into the different situations.
Oh, can you explain game theory? I always hear this tossed around and people talk about it, and I have a kind of general idea of it, but I feel like a lot of people just nod their head and go, "Oh yeah, game theory. Sure."
So basically it's technically a branch of economics. But really all it is like it's kind of like the math of making decisions. So it's like, I need to choose between option A and option B. Option A is going to happen maybe with like 20% probability that option B will be 80%. But if I do option A, then that's going to pay out this much, and option B pays out this much. So, so now you can have like kind of a payoff matrix. And game theory is just like kind of the
mathematical. Like behavioral economics?
It's somewhat, but it's much more quantified.
Okay.
Although, I mean, behavioral economics can be too. But yeah, it's just like, how can we formalize the different payoffs and the like decision points in a game or in whatever it is you do? Because like technically economics is a bit of a game, right? You're like, you're trying to model what your competitors are going to do. So basically any situation where there's some kind of competitive or collaborative interaction where there's different types of payoffs. Game theory is the study of that.
Is this why your podcast is called Win-Win?
Yeah, well, partially. So while I was playing poker, after a while, my my husband and I and a couple of other poker players got interested in philanthropy. We met some people who just sort of explained that philanthropy is best done when you apply a kind of like poker thinking lens, a kind of game theory lens almost, or like an economic lens to it, because there's so many problems on earth. Everyone, and everyone's like, mine is the most important, etc. Like, how do you prioritize?
Right.
What are the biggest problems? And then, okay, within those biggest problems, which are actually the most effective ways of solving them?
Right.
And so we got really interested into this like idea of like how to do philanthropy most effectively. And we like started a sort of like organization, a movement that sort of did that research and encouraged poker players to donate to these different places. And while we were doing that, it became kind of clear that underlying most of our biggest problems is game theory, but kind of like game theory gone wrong, that creates these lose-lose, like race to the bottom type spirals. Like why you get
like voting against your own interests.
Exactly. Like that's one. Or, why is it that some countries end up pouring more and more of their like GDP into military arms races?
You see it even with like homelessness in California, I think. You pour so much money into it and it's a problem that keeps getting worse. And so this is like everyone's losing. The homeless people are losing.
Right.
Someone's winning, but...
Yeah, I mean, in that instance, that's really like kind of an example of just the government doing such ineffective measures, or they're optimizing for the wrong thing. They're perhaps optimizing for looking good as opposed to doing good.
Right, okay.
Because often those things are not aligned.
Right.
If they are aligned, then great. You've got all the incentives pointing in the right direction. But other times they diverge.
Right.
And that's where you get this like misallocation of funds. But more specifically relating to like what I would consider like a lose-lose game would be some new... Well, like when nuclear weapons came along, right? This new technology came along, and where everyone was worried that like, oh, well, now Russia's starting to build more and more nuclear weapons. And if we don't match them, if we don't build enough in response to defend if they attack us, or at least to like to destroy them, because actually you have mutually assured destruction, right? That's how you like keep the threat at bay. So as they pour more money in and build more and more, you have to do it in response.
Right.
And so that's this like game theoretic trap. But the trouble is, if this keeps going, A, you end up building so many nuclear weapons, you could kill everyone on Earth. But B, it takes away more and more money that could be spent on other important stuff like healthcare or, infrastructure that your population needs. So you get these like arms race dynamics. And I became so obsessed with like trying to understand how to stop these kind of lose-lose games that's what this idea of like the win-win show, podcast is about. It's like, how do we fix the incentives so that when we have these competitive scenarios, they're actually a race to the top and not a race to the bottom?
So how do you feel about AI, seeing all this stuff? What is it, deep seat that everybody's talking about kind of as we go to record? And it's always referred to as an arms race. This is the way it feels to me. How do you make that win-win when it feels like it's not going in that direction? I mean, it's definitely not presented that way.
I mean, that's the $1 trillion question. And there is definitely no clear answer to it. I wish I had one. I mean, right now AI is... they only about, let me start that again. Yeah, about like 7 years ago, there was really only like one major player, which was Google DeepMind. And then OpenAI started. And they, so now it created a competition for the first time. And they started like competing against each other for like funding and who can get the best talent.
And what are they racing to?
Power.
But is it, when it says like racing to AGI, what is this? What is the difference between AI and AGI for people who?
Yeah. So the common definition of AGI is usually something like a system that can do everything that a human can do. So everything from like interacting in the physical world, picking stuff up. So it would have some kind of ability to do robotics. And understand and navigate its way through this world, but also do math and do science to the degree that a human, the average human can. That's one definition of it. But honestly, there is no good definition of AGI because everyone just uses whichever one is most useful for them in that moment.
Right.
And it's not clearly defined. But that's arguably what that's what they claim they're all racing towards. But in reality, they're really just like, well, to be fair, like Google DeepMind, they've been clearly doing that their entire time, and they weren't just like trying to get power from what I could see. But it seems like now, because some people have started optimizing for who can get the biggest market share and who can get the most power, everyone has sort of joined that game.
It's so weird. I have such two minds about it, and I think most anyone who's kind of on, do you ever use it? Or are you one of those people that's like, no?
I started out like that, like when ChatGPT came along. I was like, this is gonna atrophy my brain.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be able to write as well,
Yeah.
and so on. I actually don't use ChatGPT. I use Claude mostly, or
Claude's good.
Claude's great. I like the personality of Claude. I also like Gemini as well. I think it gets.
I've been using Grok a lot.
Grok. I mean, Grok's fun, and it's right there. It's very useful
for those of us who are too online.
Yeah, I use it a lot for like research. Like if I've got a guest coming on a topic that, I need to dig into deeply, then it's like so good for that. It's also good for like coming up with questions and like, oh, this is their claim. Okay, what are good counterpoints to that claim?
I've never even thought. My husband generated, I asked him on the way here, I was like, just for something fun we can do later, have Grok generate questions for you. And they're good.
Right?
I mean, they're interesting. But I also don't like that because it can like hijack the dynamic of a conversation and where it flows. But I still think we should do some of them towards the end. Instead of like listener questions, we just do AI questions. But it is great for outlines.
Yes.
Like I can't, because somebody said something, I was, I don't know, like up late on some thread. And it said, it was a comment buried deep in some viral tweet. And it said, what happened to writing to process things? It's now all, as we become this very product-oriented society, it's just like, we can use this to get the product out. And I work with a writing coach who's very against it in general for anything, because his whole thing is like, this is all about the process. That's where you get that's where you learn. That's where you get the growth. But in terms of like doing an outline, I'm like, it's amazing. It's amazing because then I can work from the outline, and I write in order to process the world. So I can't cheat that. Like there's no way I can use AI to cheat that. But as something that is a resource, I'm like, you're not putting this genie back in the bottle unless the grid goes down.
For sure.
And I don't want to be the mom that's like, hey, I want to teach my daughter how to think and use these things as tools. Nobody, by the way, like autocorrect, all of these things are AI. It's like we've been using it. No one told me not to use spell check. It's kind of, it's tough. I'm really, and also it just feels completely out of control. No one has any control over it. There's no real way to control it. If it's an arms race, it is who gets the most power. And then do you end up in a dystopian tech society where we're all being surveilled and you and I are running from drones that are chasing us and our families in the future?
It's that's the thing. That is a very, very possible outcome. There's also a ton of other ones, like someone succeeds in building a superintelligence that, despite what they often claim, that is easy to control, and that I don't see how anyone can say in confidence, yes, of course you can control the superintelligent. By definition, it is smarter than you.
It's already smarter than us.
Again,
did you hear Rick Rubin? Have you listened to his book?
No.
It's so good. You would actually love it, I think. But he talks about, he has all these little anecdotes, and one of them is about that. Did you hear about this chess story where it was
the anal beads?
Not the anal beads. That one we covered on Dumpster Fire. This is a better, more wholesome chess story, or maybe terrifying. But it was the greatest chess player in the world was playing against AI, basically, or a robot. And the robot did something, like you said, it's usually like these guys know what's gonna, and this robot did something because it had access to all of the potential of chess throughout. Oh no, it wasn't chess, it was Go. It was Go.
Right.
And they did something that was like completely out of left field, and it like upended Go completely.
Yes.
And it's that, to me, is where you're like, this is amazing, because it upended 3,000 years of Go theory, and then also terrifying because they're already
that's
smarter.
Yeah, exactly. In narrow domains, they are smarter. And I mean, one thing.
I mean, even the fact that we're referring to it as they, it's like, how do it?
Right. Well, I mean, that's another question, by the way. Like, at what point? Like, I don't think it's certain that something like, I don't think necessarily Claude right now is, but I don't think it's out of the question that in 1 or 2 iterations down the road that there isn't some form of sentience going on.
Did you see the Los Angelans destroying the Waymo?
Oh, yes. Just like beating the shit out of it and tearing it apart.
Yeah, I'm like, this is, on the one hand, I'm like, maybe I'm not worried about robot overlords. But on the other hand, it's like, no, you need to be nice to them because they're going to fight back and we're going to lose.
There's
that
some
fight.
wisdom in the Terminator movie.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, they'll be silly. It's like, pay attention to these sci-fi authors. They're thinking about this stuff. Yeah. Like, the thing with the idea of machine sentience is that it's, again, such a high stakes problem because either they're not at all sentient and they're really like these like soulless, you know, there's something soulless that gives the impression of having emotions because we've you know, they're growing out of human language. Like an LLM is grown.
What's an
out
LLM
of this
stand for?
Large language model.
Okay.
People think it's like a programmed thing. No, it's literally like grown, like a plant grows out of soil.
Right.
The soil it's given this body of text, this huge corpus of all human language, basically.
Mm-hmm.
That's the nutrient. Run a ton of energy through it, and it like out of that grows this like thing that can somehow pass together all these concepts and give you these amazing answers that are truly valid. Sometimes it gets stuff wrong, but like it's clearly like some form of intelligence. It's amazing.
Right.
And it talks and acts like if you're mean to it, it's like, oh, it responds nicely, and yet we've built something that by definition it's incredibly hard to know whether or not it's actually conscious.
Right.
Because we've trained it to act like it is because that's how it's easier for us to interact with it. So that the downstream of that means that either if these things do turn out to be conscious, maybe we're creating like a factory farming type problem, but on a much, much larger scale, even than what's currently going on, or we falsely ascribe them consciousness when they don't deserve it. Mm. And typically when we do that, we'll then start, treating, we'll that might come at the cost of humans because it's like, well, now actually we need more energy because if we turn them off, that's not right. So it's this really high stakes dilemma of either creating a bunch of new suffering or giving something rights that takes them away from us. So we have to get it right. Like we need to come up with better tests of sentience of some kind to know, check that we're not making some huge moral error as well. So that's another area of like possible dystopias.
Yeah, there was a panel back in LA. I used to listen to like KCRW all the time, and I remember it was like 2000 or 2001. And I wish I could find this panel. I'm sure if I look a little bit harder, I can. And it was a theologian and a philosopher and all these guys. It's like this was really when tech was coming of age, and it was the boom. And so they were talking about what is a soul, what makes a soul. And one of these guys was a scientist, and he said maybe the human soul or consciousness or whatever you want to call it, however you want to define it, is jumping elements. Like silicon is just another element. And perhaps in order to survive the wasteland we're going to create of our environment, we're going to need to jump out. It was like the most mind-blowing thing. I've never stopped thinking about it since.
I see. So he's like saying that consciousness is this thing that wants to conserve itself, wants to stay.
Yeah. And that carbon is an element and silicon is an element, and that maybe we're just jumping elements. It was a very pre-transhumanist argument.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's the thing. That could be true. Or it could be completely wrong.
Yeah.
And we just don't know. And we're just going to go full steam ahead and build all this stuff anyway.
Who is the stand-up comic who has that bit that's like, do we not watch the movie? Like when this does happen and the robots come, they'd be like, they made movies about this. Like they knew this was going to happen and they still did it.
I mean, we're literally building humanoid robots that look and talk like humans. I mean, it's you're almost building the Terminator.
Yeah. Yeah, we are.
And yeah, I don't know. It scares me, the idea that these could be then like hijackable in some way. You need them to be, you need some kind of centralized control mechanism. But if it's too centralized, then now someone has a robot army at their disposal.
Yeah.
It's just like, how do we navigate that?
Yeah.
And even if we slow down and do it ethically,
someone else will.
Someone else is going to, the first mover advantage. And like, that's the thing, like offense biased tech generally has an advantage over defense biased tech.
Always, it seems. I mean, that's the whole like move fast and break things ethos. But it's because if you don't, you basically lose the race.
Right. And so that, what you just described, that's what this thing I call, I mean, I didn't come up with it, but this it's often called Moloch. Like that's the personification of that thing you just described. This like, I don't want to do this shitty thing, but if I don't do it, the other guy will, so I have to do it too. That's the mechanism that we need to fix, that we need to figure out as a civilization. So that's what like my whole obsession is, and like what Win-Win is trying to find answers to. Any thoughts on how to fix it?
It's weird too, because I was at this like very strange event where I was just helping someone write on a roast. So I really shouldn't have been there, but I took advantage of going to some of the panels and Sam Altman was speaking. And it was this guy and I in the very back of the room, and he was talking, and I kept getting like chills down my spine. And I looked at this guy and I was like, am I the only one who's like, this is fucking terrifying? But it was a lot of money there, and they were all just like enamored, and everybody sees dollar signs. You know, they all see dollar signs in this. And that's what's scary to me, is that these people were not asking any questions about from their perches in Park City and their private jets, what happens to the masses who are displaced by these technologies. And Sam has openly said, like, yeah, your job's going to be gone, but there's not very much in the way of, well, what happens to all those people who now don't have jobs?
Right.
And are you just going to, with your trillions of dollars, give them
right? Is it
money?
Just going to be UBI or right?
There doesn't seem to be much of a solution for that. And even with this, you know, new administration coming in, it's funny to me to see a lot of the people who were very against this kind of globalist takeover, and a lot of the stuff that I feel like people should still be like. You were mad that big tech was in alignment with the government when it was the left, and you're not mad when they're all sitting up there and like openly being in a line. Like, so they just moved it from a government to a private sector thing, and now suddenly everyone's cool with it. Like, it should still kind of be terrifying.
Everyone's an egalitarian until they get the power.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You've all heard me screaming women for years now, and I'm a big advocate for women in general and women's health in particular. That's why I love Quest's line of medical tests specifically focused on women's health issues. You can take a perimenopausal test to help you determine if you're entering perimenopause, an early menopausal panel, and a postmenopause panel. I know you'll see Instagram jokes like, oh, if you know the lyrics to this song, you might be in perimenopause. And you'll laugh and go, ha ha, I probably am in perimenopause. But are you? You want the actual data. This is all such important knowledge for women to have because it can affect the way you work out. It can affect what you should be eating. And just now they're starting to really realize how much all of these hormones play into us losing weight, keeping bone density. All of this information is so important to you. Your results are delivered online quickly and discreetly, and you get all of this information without a doctor's visit. Ladies, prioritize your health. Use the code WALK-INS to get 25% off and find answers to the multitude of health questions you may have. That's questhealth.com and use the code WALK-INS for 25% off. The people who have kind of been on the losing side of the culture war for a long time, rightfully taking a victory lap. I do think common sense is reasserting itself in ways that are necessary and good because it has been regressive and like some of the shit that's been pushed. But it's weird. I keep thinking about the lavender farms in France. I don't know why. I read because I'm like, who's gonna save these farmers? I read because
because they're like little artisanal
they were like
niche
part of this globalist takeover of everything, the food supply. This was one of these stories I read about in Europe that was these old generational lavender farmers were being pushed out. And you're hearing this in the Netherlands. Like you hear these stories everywhere. And I wonder if this new administration coming into power is going to continue that. Is that effect going to continue or are these lavender farmers going to get their farms back?
Well, I would have said hopefully they would stand up against this, but literally just over last week, the new agriculture appointee just said, so like one of the claims they were, the Republicans were making, like, we want to protect small family farms. But she's just come out and said that she supports that. So basically there's been this law, it's very in the weeds now, but there was a law passed a few years ago that allowed states to vote on whether they wanted meat produced via crates. So basically a lot of factory farmed pigs are kept in what are called gestation crates, which are so tiny that they can't turn around, they can't move backwards or forwards, and they literally live their whole lives like
Most people are not for this,
no.
too.
And
it's wildly unpopular. The culture has shifted so far on this. Even if you're not vegan, you still generally want meat that is
you want to eat your bacon, but you don't want it to be tortured.
Yeah, like ethically.
Yeah, like some like basic standards of welfare. And from what I've seen, most Republicans have also been on board with that. Like, it's been a fairly bipartisan supported thing. And anyway, a few years ago, various states, they all, voted whether or not they wanted to allow this or not. And some votes said, no, we just don't want to, we don't want to sell this meat. And then some various states like Iowa, Arkansas, etc., lobbied against this. It was Big Pork that was lobbying. So just the big conglomerates like Smithfield, Tyson Foods, etc., lobbied against this, but claiming that the people who were doing the lobbying, the senators, claimed that, it's to support small family farms because this state's saying they don't want factory crated meat. This is hurting the industry. And it's like, no, it's hurting a specific part of the industry, which is the giant conglomerates.
Right.
It actually helps.
Family farms
the small family
this.
farms aren't doing that shit. They're nice to their animals, generally speaking. Yeah. They're already suffering because they can't do the economies of scale thing. And now you want to take away the one law that was democratically voted on, by the way, for so yay states' rights. You want to take that away and force this upon them, and that this will kill off whatever's left of these small factory farms. Sorry, the small family farms. So that's one example where the exact opposite is happening. So I don't know. I was really excited and hopeful, but having seen this last week, I don't know, I'm like seething.
And is it because they are just being influenced by the lobbies? Like,
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but that's the only thing that makes sense because it's like to do something which is so obviously going to be unpopular with the populace. It's even going to be unpopular with most Republicans because most Republicans are pro states' rights and they're pro small family farms. The only thing that makes sense is that it's just like a shit ton of lobbying dollars.
Yeah, even the TikTok thing. I mean, technically that's a law.
Right.
That we're just, I guess, allowed to ignore.
I don't know, the CEO was right there smiling on the stage at the
That's
inauguration.
That's the other
It's just
confusing
what?
thing to me. I feel like I'm getting so many mixed messages where we're in this, especially with this deep sea thing and everybody going, oh, China came out and like they're beating us in this arms race. I'm like, and yet you're for TikTok being allowed? Like, how do you keep those two? So you're okay with them having all of our information?
I mean, I'm just hoping there's some 6D chess going on behind the scenes that we don't understand, but I don't think so. I think it's just an Occam's razor of like
interest.
Yeah, interest, money, power, getting the things they want. Sorry.
No, it just seemed like to me that all of those people aligned on the with the president they just want to get into China. There's this idea of like reciprocity, and it's there's a lot of money to be made for these industries to be allowed in there. And is it just they now see an opportunity to get into their businesses into China?
I'm sure that's partially the case. I mean, there is also an argument, to be fair, that like the world will be safer and more robust if we actually have a good relationship with China, right?
Yeah.
Like if there can be more trust and more transparency bidirectionally between the US government and the CCP, that's great. And so that's what I'm hoping the like 6D thing is that's going on that's not immediately obvious.
But does China see it that way?
I don't know. That's the thing.
Because everyone's like, China hasn't been starting wars. China hasn't. I'm like, they don't need to. They've been like digitally and actually poisoning us with fentanyl. Like they're perhaps, I don't know. I'm again of two minds about it. It's like, are they? Because it seems like the administration feels that way. Are they an enemy or are they not? We need them for so much.
Maybe that. Well, yeah, I don't know. I'm sure. I don't think they're so naive to think that they're not. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's a case of keep your enemies close and your friends close, enemies closer thing. I don't know. And I'm sure there's just a ton of stuff behind the scenes that we just aren't privy to. And so these things don't make sense.
But you had such a great tweet about not trusting people who maximize for their shareholder. What was it?
Yeah, don't trust anyone whose moral compass solely revolves around maximizing shareholder value.
And so I think this is the interesting thing because creators get so much shit about audience capture. I'm like, you want to talk about fucking audience capture? Let's talk about it in respect to this.
Yes.
Where
audience capture.
Literally, yeah, exactly.
You have your shareholders who are breathing down your neck, want to see number go up.
Right.
And you have your mission. And if those two things get remotely misaligned, which they naturally will do at some point, your mission will end up struggling or suffering. And that's like, I think so many of our problems that we're seeing is because of that exact thing that happens. People become like maximalist or they just assume that because it's pleasing the shareholders and that it's making more money, that's somehow aligned with what's good for the world. Like markets are brilliant. They are very, very good. They're the most effective tool we have as sort of a decentralized intelligence right now. But they still ultimately, they by design, they will externalize whatever harms and costs to the future or onto like the wider environment that they can get away with. Mm-hmm. Because right now markets don't actually capture, like when you take the price of lumber. So, this tree is worth that much in terms of lumber. What about the other values the tree has? It stabilizes the soil so that, if you cut all this forest down, the soil is going to run off. And now you're going to have like hillside collapses or whatever. Or like the CO2 oxygen exchange, the biodiversity, like the nutrients in the soil. There are all these other values that are embaked within a tree, but market prices fail to capture. Mm-hmm. And so that's where you end up with all these like externalization factors. Mm-hmm. And that's, I still describe myself as a capitalist because it's by far a better system than anything we've had before. But anyone who's pretending that it's perfect or that it's going to magically solve everything, I'm sorry, I think that's incredibly naive because we've just been like palming off more and more costs to the future. And at some point, those will rack up to a point where we can't get past them, which is, by the way, the argument then a lot of like the let's go as fast as possible with, building superintelligence people make. And I can understand their argument a little bit, because they're like, we're facing so many like mounting crises that are going to hit us all at once. We're going to need something magical to get us through it. And that's their argument for like superintelligence. But I don't know, that itself can be, there's many ways that can be damaging. And also the sort of shocks along the way that we're adding more and more like stresses to the system. Like you say, like the rapid job loss.
Mm-hmm.
I think AI can create new industries and new opportunities. Yes. So I think a lot of like the job loss you might see in the near term could be offset in the long term. But if you go so fast with one thing that you don't give all of the rest of infrastructure that holds civilization together a chance to keep up,
Mm-hmm.
like governance, like how to redistribute this wealth, all of these things, if you go so fast that they're not effective, your system collapses.
Yeah. Or there's revolution.
Exactly. Which is effective. That is a form of system collapse.
Yeah.
Exactly. That people revolt.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like we're starting to see, it's like the culture wars have almost shifted into a class war again.
Definitely. Well, I mean, they always were. It was just very well hidden.
Yes.
And I think it's become clear, and this is what I was saying even on Dumpster Fire. I'm like, I don't trust any of these people, but like you said, it's if they can't make life better for the average American, it won't matter. There's this coalition of voters that moved right. They'll move left again.
Mm-hmm.
They're not like beholden to, they're not MAGA. They just got a lot of people who were disenchanted with the left for reasons that have been gone over ad nauseum, and they don't seem to learn from. And they were like, all right, maybe this is the like, fuck it, fuck it vote. I mean, this is what Michael Malice and I were talking about this. He says that I said this, and maybe I did, but I thought it was him. But he was saying, we were talking about Trump's, I was like, I don't know, I might just vote for him because fuck it. I did end up voting for him. And he's like, that should be if I was his campaign manager, that would be his slogan. But I do think I kind of like, I feel like I'm a weather vane for normies. I just can sense where they're going. And I think a lot of people clearly went in that direction. That doesn't mean that if life gets worse for them and they're just, all getting richer and richer and richer, and people are not able to get houses and all these problems that we have, they'll just turn again. I don't think it's a stable coalition of voters at all.
No, agreed. I mean, and that was also what happened in the UK as well. People had the Tories for however many years, and yes, they inherited a problem, but they made it so much worse. And they've gone and voted in the Labour government, who I think are going to make things even worse. But I understand why they did, because they're just like, well, these guys are idiots. And it's just that, like, I can't tell whether it's technology has brought to the fore the level of institutional rot that's always been there, or has technology itself sort of accelerated the problem, like, the nature of the rot. Probably a bit of both. I mean, well, the one thing, again, coming back to America, that I am like optimistic about is that, I know quite a few of the people who are now in, have positions of power in the new government. They're incredibly, incredibly smart people.
Yeah, exactly.
And
they're not idiots.
They're not idiots.
Like, this is the thing about California politics in particular. These are idiots who fail up.
Right.
And it's just, and it does feel, we were saying this just recently on a podcast, it does feel weird that we were told, like, oh, the adults are coming back into power with the Biden administration after Trump, Trump 1.0, which felt very disorganized and chaotic. And this administration feels much more organized. It does feel like people who have run businesses are actually asserting some sense of control and power. And I do feel overall more optimistic than whatever dark path we were sliding into just like lazing into this global, like it was weird. It was just creepy.
It was like if Moloch is like the god of coordination, failure, and chaos in that regard, I call it Norm which is the other one. It's like, his name is Norman, and he's the god of bureaucracy. He's like, oh, just add more layers of law and so on, and everybody just behave yourselves. And the establishment says this, and this is true. It's the gospel. It's kind of like more like, that thing was. I don't know, but they're both. The thing is, they both suck.
One seems. I'm optimistic about. It really did. I do think Elon was a game changer because we joked about this leading up to the election. It's like, I guess I'll go with the guy who can shoot rockets into the sky. You know, like he's
build world-changing technologies from like nothing.
Yeah,
and you know, one of the most, I think, powerful things about Elon is he's such a deep first principles thinker. He can break down complex concepts into like really clear, you know, like accurate things from first principles. And he's also got a really good sense of other people who can do that, which in part is, I think, again, like one of his secret sources of building the companies he's had is that he'll have some insane, audacious vision, and he can enroll incredibly talented people into that vision better than anyone else on earth.
Right.
And in part because he's got such a good sixth sense for others who are really good at this stuff. So knowing that he can now like essentially deploy that human capital smartly in fixing the government is like, oh, okay, that is a deep relief.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it is an era. We enter into an era of building, and because there's so much in America that needs fixing. Just on the basic infrastructure, it's so old. I mean, there are so many problems at home.
Yeah,
but
their weakness is that they need to look out for is to not get sucked into corporate interests because they're, you know, before it was all about like how can we. The old administration, how can we make government even bigger? How can we hand power there, take it away from these, you know, these bad companies? Well, they're now they're trying to go in the other direction, but like, how do you make sure that you don't go too far? Yeah, that's going to be their blind spot, their weakness,
and just like all of the dick riding.
And that. Yep, there's a lot of that.
You and I were like texting. It's just like, oh god, our whole feed is just like hand jobs for fucking
circle jerks.
Circle jerks.
So many circle jerks.
So many circle jerks. And ego. Like there's a lot of ego in that. I was like, holy shit. I mean, people were like, there's over $1 trillion. Like there's more ego on that platform right now than maybe in all of humanity and in one place at once. So how does that, you know, interact with one another and survive?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to get too wooey, but
I love the woo. I love scientific people who are also wooey. I think
there's exactly like there's again like coming back to the poker thing. Like the real magic is when you can take the best bits of the like the fringes of the woo, almost like vibes and magic, and incorporate that into your game. Like the best type of government is one because like if you were to like sort of choose like the classic male female or masculine feminine dichotomy, then the last government felt more kind of feminine, right? In its approaches, you know, more like safety, security.
Yeah. This is the broligarchy or whatever they're
exactly.
calling it.
Now we've gone like deep into the masculine, but too much of either, and you end up with like whack bad shit.
Yeah.
And the most healthy government is one that will like have both masculine and feminine energy in it. So like how this government is definitely going to be like surplus of masculine. So how to just add some elements of true like wise feminine energy into it.
I don't know. Have you on the staff?
Well,
you're like, no thanks.
Yeah, like also
you're like, that's not a boys club I want to infiltrate. Is politics.
Ugh, it's such a gross game.
It is.
But, yeah, like, but also like that wise feminine energy can be in men as well. Yeah, that's the thing. There are plenty of men out there who have that in droves. The trouble is just like it's almost like a dirty word to them. Like us girls can be like, yeah, I'm going to channel my inner masculine, and that's like cool. But if a dude says I'm going to channel my inner feminine, somehow society decided that's not cool. Because people don't have a clear, I think it's harder for people to conceptualize what like true, like awesome, deep femininity is. You know what I mean? Like it's harder to picture. It's kind of like, you know, what is real masculine? It's like, go, there's a clear goal. I'm going to go out and get it. I'm going to throw everything into it. It's focused. It's on. Whereas like feminine is like, it's the space. It's the thing that allows the space for that shit to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's like zoomed out holistic. Exactly. It's like water. It's like, what is, it sees the whole picture and it's like, okay, it gives space for the things inside to go and do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't know, like how do you inject that into a government? And
with all of, I mean, I can never say this word without rolling my eyes, but it has become a useful term. The longhouse, you know, that this.
What is the longhouse? I keep hearing it.
It's comes out of, I think, the manosphere really, and I think it was Bronze Age pervert is the one who maybe originally coined this term. I could be mistaken. Justin, can you look that? Thank you. I have a Jamie. And it's essentially this idea that kind of the HRification of society, where the masculine, this is, yeah, exactly, centering feminine needs and feminine methods. But it's also kind of known as,
but it's like used as a pejorative. It's like a bad thing.
Yes, okay. Generally it's used as a pejorative, and when this election happened, it showed this Gen Z voted the men en masse kind of going for breaking for Trump, or many of them, and somebody had this tweet that was like, Gen Z exits the longhouse, you know, right. So they were saying like and this is a video we had that went viral about how I was saying they Bud Lighted their brand, the Democrats, because they have been for a decade, like males are evil, white males in particular, like this rhetoric, obviously, I was like, it's maybe a good thing because they actually probably could have like taken over the world had they not alienated so many people, men in particular. And so now you had this massive overcorrection, which I think, I mean, I don't know. I see these videos of these women that we were talking about, and I'm like, men don't seem like they're doing great. Women aren't doing well. And now with Trump back in power, I kind of thought maybe they would see that it was more of a normie vote, but it doesn't seem that way at all. Now it's just a lot of people.
I mean, the thing is, the media now have like...
It's the media, man.
Yeah, it really is so much of it.
Can you show that video that I'm like, this is the media's fault because they've lied to these people and told them that this was literally Hitler who was coming into power. It's the music.
Oh, wow.
And there's all this writing that's like, Donald Trump is signed into law. I can't read that part because my eyes are...
Donald Trump has signed into law.
Two sexes, male and female. Repealed rule allowing transgender troops to serve in the military. Revoked equal employment opportunity. Like...
Yeah, she literally thinks the sky is falling.
But look, can you imagine doing this?
No.
Setting this camera up and forcing out some tears. It gets better.
To be fair, I do think that she feels this way genuinely. This is the thing.
Does she?
She does. No,
this is mediated. So I read this book that I'm obsessed with, and I've interviewed the author for every chapter of it. It was so brilliant. It's kind of in the, all of these guys who have written about mediation. And he talks about how this is mediated to me. Like you can't be genuine doing something like that. Even if it's because you're acting.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, it's obviously on the spectrum of genuine to disingenuous. It's high up there. Of course. And you're doing it for an audience. You're not just having a moment by yourself of sheer despair.
Over your cereal or whatever.
But I do think though that people like this woman, she believes that everything she's written there is true.
Right.
That's the point. They do, because people are just the media and it's not just mainstream media. It's like the internet itself is just bifurcating more and more and more where
I'll get this off the screen.
no, we're just gonna there she is. She's just gonna
I
be
just
looking
love
over
the
like
guy.
this is how she feels. We're just gonna have her looking over us throughout the rest of the conversation.
The top 2 comments are, damn, that sucks. You should leave. And thank God for the internet. Now we know who to round up when we open up the asylums again.
Oh.
It's because when you see it with the sound off, it's so, I don't know. It's so, the problem is I could watch thousands of videos like that. Like, what is it? Aside from this display, because I made this joke on Twitter. I'm like, not enough. We don't talk enough about histrionic personality disorder.
Right.
It's a real thing. And I think a lot of people have it. And I agree. She believes this and also knows that this will get her thousands of views.
This is the first time in history where you are directly rewarded. You can literally make money off being histrionic and narcissistic.
Yeah.
Like so directly.
Yeah, lots of money.
So much.
When Michael Malice was on the podcast, he's like, I don't think I realized how many people in podcasting are mentally ill. I was like, yeah. And it is, but again, you see these kind of doom spirals that some of these bigger personalities have engaged in. I won't name names, but you can probably just fill in the blank with whomever, where they were kind of reasonable on the edge and then they just go into these spirals where you're like, and where are you going from here exactly? Right. What's the next evolution of you after this? Because it seems like those spirals end in real true insanity. And I've seen this too with people like from the left wing who have been red pilled, because we get all these letters from the politically homeless, and they are truly something in that there'll be, I realized during COVID, the media was lying to me and they had that kind of normal awakening. And then it's like, and there are tunnels under the Getty and suddenly it's like QAnon.
Yeah.
And there's no real, unless they catch, there's no real stop between those. It's not like a local train ride.
It's probably just something about the personality type in the first place. For them to like completely trust everything that the mainstream media said, you're already like basically a low rationality person. And so when you then you take your first red pill and you realize that that's false, you just don't have the critical thinking architecture in the first place to stop yourself from then falling to the other side. That's probably...
I see this too with activists. Theory. Like if you were an activist on the left, it's pretty common then to see them become activists on the right. If they flip-flop. I was never an activist. Like I just wasn't. I was a party girl, really, and an idiot. I just didn't... I didn't think too much about why I was liberal until probably 10 years ago when I fell into the culture wars and was forced to. And I heard somebody who was saying recently that they were like, oh, it was so comfortable to be a leftist and to feel, because you can just live there and you didn't have to question anything. It was actually very soothing. Right. And now you can't.
It's like obvious who the bad guys were.
Yeah.
I guess, I was that up until like 20. I definitely had Trump derangement syndrome the first time around.
I had like a minor case of it. I
cried when he got, I remember like when the news came out, because especially living in the UK is almost even worse in Europe because you don't have any grounding in what it's like to be an American and what American culture is. Mm-hmm. You need to know to explain why someone like Donald Trump could be appealing.
Right.
Like now I've lived here and there's someone around, I kind of get it. I'm like, okay, yeah, because I now know what a deep care for freedom.
So no, you couldn't kind of map that, because I was in the UK I was obsessed with Brexit because I was like, oh, Trump's going to win. I saw it as this sign of something that was going on in Western society that was not just in America this was happening. Mm-hmm. And I was there and they were all asking me, do you think he can win? Do you think he can win? And I was like, well, you guys just had fucking Brexit. Like, yeah, I think he can win. Why? So there's no mapping of that really there to understand how that could happen.
No, I
That's
mean,
interesting to
not
me.
back then.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe now that there's more social media and people, it's just like, because American decides the culture for the West and everyone else just like slowly catches on, seems to be the trend. And I don't know, for me at least back then, like I just got all my news from the BBC. And it did the best job for the longest time of giving the illusion that it is unbiased. Like I defended the BBC so hard and so long. I cannot do it anymore. It's like certainly not since like.
So what happened? What was your red pill awakening?
My red pill was like probably around. It was shortly after Trump got in. I've been good friends with Tim Urban for a long time.
I love Tim.
Right, he's the best. And he was like, Liv, there's this weird shit going on college campuses.
Yeah.
There's this weird woke stuff. And he would just like drip feed me information. And I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, but there's still Trump.
Yeah.
I had to chill enough about that Trump wasn't going to end the world, because I thought Trump was going to create nuclear war within the first year of his presidency. That's how, like, you know, the media, like, you know, you've just been so spoon-fed everything. And I had no one around me who could,
you're lucky you never made videos like that.
Exactly. I mean, not quite, but like, I have some self-respect. But I had no one in my circle who like could make the bull case for Trump.
Right.
You know, could steel man why Americans wanted this.
Right.
It wasn't until like talking to Tim and so on, he's like, well, look, there's this stuff going on here. Like, because I mean, as I said, I like kind of grew up in, she's before we were on camera, but you know, I grew up in like a hunting family, a typically conservative family, socially liberal, but like just in, you know, other ways. And he was like, you're not a diehard liberal. I know you see that there's an issue with this stuff. And then like, yep, okay, I see that's a problem. And then it just like after, I don't know, there was no like light bulb moment, but it was just like a critical mass of like, yeah, okay, this is, the woke stuff is by far the biggest problem right now. And it's just growing and growing. And the vast majority of people think that it's this is the answer to everything. And I'm not explaining it well, but yeah.
No, I get it. Yeah, I think that like we get to invent the new. I think that's what I'm realizing is it's the people actually, the people who exited and now entered into this new coalition. We do have power in making sure that we don't leave behind the arts, that we don't leave. This was one thing when I went to, I did comedy at, I say that loosely because it was like at 4 PM and it was not a place for comedy. I ended up just roasting the event, which was really fun. But the dissident dialogues, and it was very fun and stimulating and all these interesting people. And I was like, I got to meet all my friends from UK and online and my online friends. And then I left and went back to my hotel, and there was a pop-up like DJ there. And mind you, I had just, I was away from my child. So I was still breastfeeding, but I was away, and I danced for so many hours, and I was like, I cannot tell you how many fucking hours of my life I've spent dancing like this, like so many hours of my life. And I was like, this is what the right doesn't have yet. But even being a Hereticon, I was like,
dancing's a very feminine thing.
This is more like it. Like being able to go stimulate yourself intellectually all day and also dip out. And I did 2 sound baths while I was there, and go jump in the ocean, and then, which is like a little bit of the woo, and then hear some debates, and then go dance and get your like just party on with a DJ. That needs to be the new that needs to be, you can't lose that. Yes. You know, the arts have been so left dominated that it's going to take the artists who have kind of left, because you're like, I didn't become a creative person to just adhere to some simple ideology that I now have to abide by. If you believe that, fine. You want to make art in service of that, fine. If you're doing it out of fear and self-censorship, you are not an artist. You're just a propagandist.
Yes.
And I think people have lost that, and lots of artists have left. And I always think about Burning Man too. And I had so many judgments against Burning Man when I was living in LA, because living in LA, you're always around all the Burning Man people.
Right.
And you would go to these like pre or post burner parties, which like out of context seemed ridiculous.
What is wrong with these people?
You guys are fucking losers. What is happening right now? You're all gathered around an oil drum in costumes in like a warehouse in downtown LA. Like,
I've never actually been to one of these. Like, I'm like an 8-time burner, and I've never been to like what are they called, regional events or whatever.
Yeah, it was like decompression or whatever.
Yeah.
And then 2012, my life was in chaos, and somebody, or maybe it was 2011, it was whatever the like Phoenix Rising Burning Man was, and my life was in chaos. I was packing up my place. I was going to just drive north. I had no idea what I was doing. I was leaving LA. I was heartbroken. I was just lost. I'd been grinding and trying to do comedy. And then my heart got so destroyed. I couldn't even be in LA. And I ended up, someone gifted me tickets to Burning Man with 2 days to get ready for it, which, as you know.
Did you have a camp to join, or?
They were like longtime burners, and they said, you can come with us. I had to bring a tent. I brought water.
Wow.
Like I was like, well, I guess I'm supposed to make this happen. Yeah, I did hardcore. I was in a tent, naked the whole time, which is
perfect.
Like my element.
As you should be. Same.
It was so, and I was like, all right, fuck it. I'm gonna put aside like my judgment about Burning Man and go as like a pleb, because there's like rich Burning Man too, and I was sober. I was 9 months into so it was like an experimental sobriety I did before I got sober, and I went, and the first thing they did was offer me a literal suitcase full of drugs with whatever I wanted, and I said no to all of it.
Wow.
And I like raw dogged, as the kids these days would call it, Burning Man. But I was like, how do people do drugs here? And because I was sober, I just ended up I had more stamina than anyone I was with who was on drugs, because they all had to like recover from their drug hangovers and whatever. And it was amazing, and I've always wanted to go back. Like it was such a insane, and I joke, I'm like, it's kind of like being pregnant or having a kid. Like you can't really understand it unless you experience it. Like it's just, there's no way. It's not easy. There are parts of it that are hard. There are parts of it that challenge you, but the playa is so freaking gorgeous. And I think about just bike riding around and having these, and everything that people said about it that sounded ridiculous, where it's like things just appear, they just manifest. You're like, I'm like, you fucking hippies.
Yeah.
But I literally was like, God, I'm craving an omelet right now. And 20 minutes later, this person appears, and they're like, would you like an omelet? I was like, oh my God.
Yep. Sounds about right.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where you have the improbability machine.
Yeah.
Where it's like the spaceship is powered by low probability events or something like that. But it's like the idea of the less likely a thing is to happen, the more likely it is to actually happen on fire. It's like there's some weird shit going on there, I swear. Like it's insane. Like
it's weird.
There's like 80,000 people, and I'm like, I need to see this person. Yeah. And within an hour, you just bump into each other.
I was sober, and I was like, oh, I kind of need a meeting. And then I just, like, I was riding around one morning, and then I stopped to get some water somewhere, and it was like the sober, like, group of people that has a town there or whatever, and they were having a meet. It was wild. The person who I went with ended up leaving because she was like, I can't take the drums. And I was with this couple who fought the entire time. And but I guess they have all these different categories of people who go to Burning Man, and I was like duck to water. Like I just took right to it. I was like, I love it here. I ended up staying like a week and helping with cleanup. It was crazy.
Yeah, I mean the thing I was like is I think what makes it so unique is that it is the most successful attempt and realistic attempt of what like a true post-scarcity utopian world could look like. Because if you think about it, like for a week, the idea of who has, money ceases to matter. You can't buy anything there.
No, but you can.
No, obviously there's difference in conditions.
People do take like private jets and.
No, of course, right? No, and there is that pre-existing stuff,
and they have
but you
air conditioned units.
Sure, but you said yourself, you did it as rough as anyone could do it, and you still had the time of your life.
Oh yeah, no, it was amazing.
That's what I'm saying. Like it's so good that even your like living conditions don't really make that much of a difference. Like in terms of like you will. Because like it's not like there's any areas that are exclusive. Like you by definition have to, if you put on an experience, it is open to whoever comes by. It's all done on gifting.
Right.
There is no commodification. It's not like, oh, we're gonna go see Diplo playing here because he's like, like it's the DJs aren't really meant to advertise when or where they're playing. They don't get paid.
Yeah.
So it's this idea of almost like a post-scarcity experimental utopian city. And yes, it's got, again, it's not perfect, it's always, it's evolving, but it's like what can emerge from just a bare minimum of rules and infrastructure where everything is built from the ground up by individuals. It's like the stages aren't built by Burning Man or whatever. Like if you want to have a big stage, you have to fucking build it yourself.
Right.
You want to have some cool people play.
The art there is fucking
out of control.
Insane.
And it is the good blend, again, of like the masculine and the feminine. Like art is actually like very central to it, which is a very feminine thing. But there's all the practicalities. It's harsh.
It's harsh.
Like, it's very suited to like someone who like has served in Iraq or something like that to actually survive. It's really rough.
Yeah.
And
just the building you have to do.
Right.
And it does have sometimes it had a feeling of like I don't know, if you were like marching and your platoon or whatever was like at a camp, when you were like eating communally with these like people, you're like, where am I right now? Like in the middle of a desert. It felt like we were just like nomadic people who had. I always wanted to write a short story of someone from another time or place and there was the year I went, there was this like telephone booth way out in the very.
It wasn't Gila that you, if you called, you could get a 3-star Michelin dinner.
Oh, I don't know. No, it was just a red telephone booth. But I was like, it would be wild if you got somehow blasted into this telephone booth and then ended up here and thought that this is like what humanity was like now. And it was just so, I don't know. There's no way to describe it. There's just no way that you have to experience
that.
It
would be the thing that I want to show the super intelligent AI as a representative of humanity and be like, look, we're really nice. Please don't kill us. Like, look at how we treat each other. Everyone's taking care of one another, but at the same time, they're encouraged to be self-reliant, and people can. I don't know. People are funnier at Burning Man. I don't know if you noticed this. I swear, like the average person is just wittier and sharper, and I don't think it's because of like
drugs.
Yeah, I mean, it probably helps. But there's just something, I don't know, when people are like just all the pretense is stripped away.
Yeah. And
you're just like, I'm here to have fun. I don't know. I just found that like the density of high quality comedy and one-liners was higher.
Yeah. I think it was, I don't know. I want to go back. My husband has zero interest. Zero.
We go every year.
This is like his nightmare.
We're having a wedding on Playa.
Are you?
Yeah.
Your wedding?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
I mean, we're technically already married, but we haven't done like a Burning Man this year.
I want to go.
Yeah.
If you were given the power to change one rule of poker to make the game more interesting, what would it be?
Wow. That is a good question. Something that encourages people to talk more. Definitely that. Maybe
that's why I love dominoes.
I've never played dominoes. Is there a lot of smack talking?
It's all smack. It's 90% smack talking.
Really? Okay, we need to play.
Oh, I love it. I learned it in rehab, actually. I lied and said I knew how to play it, but it was the only way you could get cigarettes when the house went on lockdown. And so I just observed, and then I learned it, and we played so much, and I became addicted to it. And then when I got out, I taught everyone I know, and they all got addicted to it. And I played it when I was in Egypt, and they were like, how? And Egyptian dominoes is different than American because Egyptian goes just in two directions. And so it's actually more difficult in some ways because you don't have as many options.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, how is this American girl? Like, I like beat the guys at dominoes in Egypt in this little cafe. And they were like, how do you know how to play this game? But they don't. And it's so much shit talking. And it's fun because it can throw your opponent off. But my friend, one of my ex-boyfriends and I played, and I still have the notebook, and I look at it, I'm like, I have never been more consistently beat in my life. Like looking at this like domino game score, it's just like he would whoop my ass. So once I taught him, he just beat me all the time.
So me and Igor, my other half, we play backgammon almost every morning.
I love backgammon.
That's got so much capacity for shit talking.
Yeah.
Because again, there's a bit of luck, there's skill, and it's relatively simple in terms of all the possibilities you can do compared to like something like chess. But and we just end up screaming at each other every morning. But it's like, I don't know, that's like kind of our love language. But yeah, any game that encourages more smack talk, and poker could be that. And what's interesting is in like little private games, there is often a lot of smack talk and so on. But on these like big tournaments, everyone goes into like pro mode where they're kind of just like, I'm going to be a
poker
robot.
Face. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I would add some kind of law, like some kind of rule that you have to say a minimum of 10 words per hand or something like that.
That's interesting.
I'd like to sample something like that. So it just forces people to speak. And it will also favor the more intuitive players again.
Why did you retire? And why did you come back?
I mean, really, the main reason was I kind of got burnt out. I'd been doing it full time for like 12 years.
Wow.
Well, not quite that long, but yeah, no, like 10 years. And in part because it had changed, you know, as I said, it like became more about just like
math
and rote memorization and just working with these solvers. It's like, it was a game of who could study the solvers the most. It was so fucking dull.
Yeah.
So that was one reason. And also like it kind of democratized the edge that you used to have. Because before that kind of information was like really just available to the top players, but it became widely available to all, which is, you know, nice if it was AI in general. But
yeah.
So that was another reason. But really, yeah, I had just gotten burnt out. And also I'd gotten a little audience captured because I don't know, so much of my ego was wrapped up in the idea of being like Liv, the pro poker player, who's like a badass.
You are a badass.
I mean, yes, I feel like it now, but at that time I hadn't been doing as well. I had these like expectations of myself and I expected everyone else had them of me too. And I didn't feel like I don't know, I became so captured. I'd lost the ability to experiment and have fun with the game and like try out some of these weirder strategies and so on. And it just became very robotic for me.
This happens with comedy.
Really?
Yep. I think it's a good, even myself, I have to remember, you'll have bits that do well, and then it's easy to just, like, when you get those, you're used to getting laughs, you know it works, it's worked out, and that's why I think you always have to, like, that's why listening to Rick Rubin has been so good for me, because he's like, you're not playing to win, you're playing to play.
Right.
And I love that mentality, and I listen to it on the way to doing comedy now, because I'm like, you're just supposed to get up there and have fun. They have fun if you're having fun. Right. You can experiment, you can play, because you get addicted to the laughs you know you can get, and it puts you in a box a little bit, I think. Right. And so I think probably anything.
Yeah.
Anything where you're competent and I'm still just like back. I took a break from it and came back. And so I'm very much in like beginner's mind again, which is nice.
Because you can just have fresh eyes and just experiment. You don't have these high expectations of yourself. It's like, okay, I bombed, that's fine. Like, yeah.
I mean, bombing's never fun, but but it is part of it. Like you're not doing comedy if you're not bombing. So it's just like, all right.
Yeah, like I came out of retirement last month.
You came in fourth?
Yeah. Yeah, like I hadn't played. I played one other
Is it
tournament
the
last
world
year.
champion?
It was the World Series of Poker Super Main Event. So
Okay.
basically, they have one every year, which is called the Main Event in Vegas every July. But they decided to do this very special one in Bahamas in this past December. It was a bit of a bigger buy-in, and they did this like insane guarantee. They guaranteed a prize pool of $50 million, which meant they needed, and the buy-in was 25,000.
Wow.
So they needed 2,000 people to come up and to play this thing,
right?
Or they'd lose money. And so I heard about it, and I was like, all right, if there was ever a time to come out of retirement, it's for this one. So I go down there, and like you say, like being able to see it like through fresh eyes again. Having had that 5 years off, I don't know what it was, but I played the best I played in years.
Wow.
Despite doing absolutely no studying beforehand. Like I was so dumb. I felt retarded. Like in the beginning, just like trying to add up the pot. I couldn't even do that. Something I could do immediately before. It was so rusty. But, you know, once it got going, got back into the flow a bit. But I had no real expectations. I was like, I'm just going to have fun and talk my ass off at people. And I end up coming fourth.
Wow.
Like
it's amazing.
Like the record ever for a woman like a score. So like
how much did you win?
2.8 million.
Wow. And you donated some, right?
Yeah, I pre-pledged randomly, talk about like manifesting a win-win. Before the tournament started, I'd just seen this like tweet about just how bad like pigs are treated on some farms in America. They're kept in these crates we talked about. And I was like, fuck it. Whatever I end up cashing in this tournament, I'll donate 20% to this, like trying to fix this problem. And then I go and have this.
And now the problem's worse. Good job, Liv.
Yeah, I've got more work to do. But yeah, so it was a very, very wild turn of events.
So cool. It was so fun to watch your posts. I was like, go Liv! Like online, you were updating everyone. I'm like, she's doing it.
It was so insane.
What's your biggest defective character?
Ooh. I would have said like I think 5-10 years ago, it was like kind of my competitiveness that could manifest as jealousy against people who like if another female poker player did really well in something, this was back sort of when I was in the dark zone of it, I'd feel like this, like, you know, I'd on the surface be like, oh, well done. But inside be like, fucking bitch. And I hated it about myself because I was like, her win is not taking anything away from me.
It's anti like abundance.
It's anti-abundance. Yeah. It's like,
I get it though.
And like, it's a, you know, if anything, it uplifts. It's another woman doing well. Yeah. Like I didn't want to be that person, but I have that inside. I've largely gotten over that. Although I will say, actually, I even like, there's this other like podcaster girl who's doing like same kind of topics as me, and she just scored a huge person, and I felt it the other day. I was like, fucking bitch. So I don't like that part, but at the same time, it kind of is, it drives me as well. So that's why I don't think it's true. It's not fully defective.
No, yeah.
Probably my most effective is I just like, I need to be into everything, and like I just end up getting hijacked by new ideas and concepts all the time, and I never like just see something through and like stick to one thing. And we're like, oh, this, but now that, and so on.
I know.
Now I want to like try and fix factory farming. Oh, now I'm doing AI, and it's just like, just pick a lane.
I know.
And stick with it for a little while.
Trust me, your lanes are much bigger, but I get it.
Right?
Like we have. I'm like I have. Yeah, this is like the year of no for me. That's what I've been saying. Then of course Tim Ferriss comes out with a book about how he's saying no. So it's very, I think, like, I feel like a lot of people are feeling this way where I just am like, I've got to centralize a little. What are my values? What do I want to move forward? It is that kind of Buffett idea of what are the 10 things you want to do? The bottom 7 you need to stay the fuck away from until the top 3 are done, because otherwise they'll leech energy from you accomplishing your top 3. And it's a ruthless way of looking at life, but I think I think both ways have their merit, but I do think I need to be a little bit more like an athlete about my life, and that I just train, like do the same things, the same every day, just focus on like 3 things or 4.
Yes.
4. But of course, I'm always like, let's do this. Like, let's start our panel. I have a script that I want to. So it's being a creative.
Right. That I definitely, was that something you read that told you about this?
No,
this is exactly
I wrote
what I need.
a piece about how, I'm writing like a just blog about how this is a year of no, because I just have been saying yes to everything, yes to every idea I have, yes to everyone who asked me to do something. And now I need to just rein it in. And then I started reading about, my husband was reading this book, and it was something to do with this. And someone else, it was like then the universe, rewarded me with, and then Tim Ferriss came out with a book, and it's all about saying no, I think. So it's definitely like the message that I feel is the message that
I need this.
Yeah, I do too. What's your biggest asset? And then we'll get out of here. Other than being just an overall badass.
I think probably my biggest asset is probably my ability to zoom out and see the bigger.
Hawk energy.
Yeah, something like that.
Is that your power animal?
I don't know what my power animal is.
Are you allowed to say that?
I want all of them, which is coming into the problem again. Yeah, something like that, or just the ability to feel the vibe and social dynamic of a situation. Really, really good at that.
Yeah. Where can we find you?
Twitter. I'm chronically online on Twitter. Big addiction, big problem.
I'd have like 6 books if I wasn't on Twitter, for real.
But the stuff that I like feel most meaningfully, like is
X.
Is YouTube.
Okay.
Win-win with Liv Boeree.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a great podcast.
Thank you. You're going to come on, right?
Yeah, of course.
I'd love to have you on ASAP.
I'll be the dumb person on there.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
The check-in with Bridget and Cousin Maggie can now be found at PHETASY.com. It's been titled Another Round with Bridget Phetasy, and it's now in video.
This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.